Welcome to the Smoke and Rope Podcast. I'm your host today, Kevin Pybus with True Cannabis, and I'll be sitting in for our normal host, Ryan Basor, as he is out on the road visiting some of our dispensaries in the Upper Peninsula this week. And so today is episode 58, and we have the wonderful and always knowledgeable Rick Thompson on the phone, or on with us today. So Rick, how's it going, buddy?
It's fantastic. Thanks so much for hosting me, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. And as always, we have my co-host, the always friendly and jovial Tom Beller over at Relief Solutions. Tom, how's it going, bro?
Doing great, Kevin. Yeah, thanks for stepping in Ryan's absence. We hope he's well up in the Upper Peninsula. We know that the internet coverage up there can be spotty at best, so figured it was best for him to just do his thing. And so we'll try this out. Looking forward to it. It's always good to see Rick.
Yeah, we'll see how this thing goes. I don't think that any of us can compete with Ryan after almost 60 episodes here, so I'll try my best. I'm sure we'll make some mistakes, but we'll learn from it and we'll move forward. And of course, we'll always have a good time, right? So real quickly, Rick, for any of our listeners that don't know who Rick Thompson is, give us a quick breakdown of Rick Thompson.
Well, I'm on the board of directors of Normal of Michigan, the Redemption Foundation. I'm one of those guys. Also, Michigan Cannabis Freedoms Coalition, Cannabis Caucus of the Michigan Democratic Party. Those are my charitable things. I'm also the owner of the Michigan Cannabis Business Development Group. We did 12 small business conferences in the state prior to COVID, all of them focused on the cannabis industry. And of course, thesocialrevolution.org is my website, because primarily I'm a photographer and a journalist, but I've been doing cannabis law reform here in Michigan since the medical era began in '08.
Yeah, and I've known you for quite some time, Rick. I've seen you at all the cannabis functions when it came to the politics side. And my favorite thing about Rick Thompson is he's the guy that can say the things that we all want to say but we can't say, right? When we were going through the licensing process, there were things you just can't say, or you're going to risk going up against the board and having them, hold it against you. And while that was all going on, Rick was up at the podium telling everybody the reality of the situation. So Rick, I appreciate all you've done in this industry. You've been an integral part in all of it. And thanks for being on the show, buddy.
Kevin, thank you. I just wish no one ever had to go through that whole board process. That was such an embarrassing and ridiculous extra step. Terrible.
Yeah, Tom and I have talked about it a lot on the show. And Tom, what's your input on the board?
I have PTSD from that whole situation, man. For real, it's really bad having them just not knowing a thing about you and clawing through your past and making assumptions. And just because you're a caregiver now, all of a sudden, how am I unqualified to handle cannabis? You know what I mean? It's just ridiculous. So there's a lot of that. I also wanted to mention, Rick, news. Yet another board that you've been assigned to or brought on to is the John Sinclair Foundation.
Thank you very much.
Tell us a little bit about that. Yeah, congratulations.
Thanks again. The John Sinclair Foundation is a foundation set up by the man himself, the historical legend John Sinclair, in order to protect his legacy. He's got over 30 recorded albums and many, many books that he's put out, but so much more than that too, because John Sinclair is multifaceted. He's a beat poet. He's a chronicler of the drug war, but he was also a music promoter all the way back in the MC5 days too. Plus the White Panthers, his time in New Orleans for the Blues Project. He's got a lot of assets. And what we really want to do is make sure that future generations have a chance to appreciate what John contributed to in a way that makes sense. And so keeping them all together and controlled in one environment as opposed to just being everywhere where anyone can willy-nilly take away from it. This seems like a
you don't want other people. Yeah, you don't want other people directing the narrative of history. We know that happens way too often.
Yeah. Controlling intellectual property is a significant part of what authors and recording artists do nowadays. We wish it wasn't that way, but it is.
Yeah, well, great on you, Rick, for stepping in and helping where needed. We know that when you're in charge of it, that the right thing and the justice thing and the righteous thing will happen. So glad to have you a part of that. Tom, you had jumped in there real quick. I see that you guys have the Relief Golden Ticket giveaway, and then I saw Rick hiding in your garden there. So maybe you guys want to talk to me a little bit about that. What's going on with the Golden Ticket?
Well, the Golden Ticket is something that we've been kind of mulling over for some time. The idea at Real Leaf is that cannabis is fun. the whole idea is to have fun. And in order to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, we've decided to bring the whole idea that we've been kicking around for a few years now to fruition. And we do have 5 golden tickets that are going out in Real Leaf products across the state of Michigan to our provisioning centers that we work with. And there'll be a chance for people to win a chance to come up here, stay at at a hotel in town, come to the lounge that we're opening this fall, have a tour of the facility and see how cannabis has grown, how we do it here at Real Leaf, and spend some time in Kalkaska checking it out. Just it's a really amazing town, and we really want to share it with more people from around the state. So that's kind of the idea.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think Kalkaska is a great town. It doesn't get enough recognition, and the people there are absolutely wonderful to deal with. And so, yeah, I think people really appreciate the opportunity to come up and see you and check out the town. Rick, I did see also while you were up north, you were sampling some of our good friend Driven Grow's new Mafia Funeral. Maybe you ought to give us a report on that spliff that you were smoking on.
Well, first of all, let's just talk about Real Leaf Solutions for a second. I did tour that facility. It is top flight. I've been in a lot of places in the state, as you can imagine, and some are large, some are small, but it's based on the people. You can have clean hallways and still have a terrible facility if you don't have good people running it, and Real Leaf really does. And I know, Kevin, you assembled a team of good people working with you as well, too. So congratulations to both of you for being successful with that. But I do love me some Redemption Cannabis. I'll tell you, Driven Grow's got that Mafia Funeral, super nice. I was given a 3-pack of those joints by Mr. Basar when we were visiting down in Detroit, one of the facilities down there with Luxury Loud, I believe. And I had to have one right away because, man, just smelled so good. But I did save the other 2, one for myself and for a friend of mine who's a cancer patient. And when we're at the Flint Drop Fest this last weekend, we were able to go to the second floor of a parking structure overlooking the Drop Fest and enjoy that Redemption Cannabis. And let me tell you, a couple people walking by said, "Hey, that's loud, man." They recognized the quality just from the secondhand smoke. So beautiful job.
Yeah, yeah. Well, speaking about inhaling some THC, recent news came out that Wayne State University was awarded $7 million grant to research cannabis and its effect on treating veterans with PTSD, anxiety, sleep disorder, depression, and suicidality. And as it turns out, you had a part in that as well. You want to tell us about that?
Well, when we crafted the language of the 2018 legalization program here in Michigan, we included a gift to veterans, veterans with PTSD. We included $20 million in year 1 and $20 million in year 2, dedicated specifically toward research for veteran services and PTSD. There was a little bit of a delay in awarding that first $20 million, but it has been awarded now. It was split into 2 separate awards. One, $7 million, went to Wayne State University. The other, $13 million, went to the MAPS, the Association of Psychedelic Studies. And that's an important a group because that's where Dr. Sue Sicily receives her funding and does her work through. Dr. Sicily is who we originally had envisioned when the crafters of the law put that in there. There's maybe 9 people that can be credited with actually being authors of the law. I am not one of those. I'm one of the people in the circle just outside of them. But the fact is we all had some input on it. And PTSD is so important. We don't fully understand what it does with the human brain. All of the traditional medications that have been used for it seem ineffective. But there's one thing that anecdotal evidence tells us works, and that's cannabis. And so what we really need to do is help these veterans gain the approval of the Veterans Administration for utilizing cannabis. And not just veterans, but once vets get that approval, everyone else with PTSD is going to feel more comfortable doing it too. The only way to get the Veterans Administration to make that agreement is to show them the science. And so what we really are trying to do is to spark the science so that we can make that eventual good deed happen, which is the VA approving cannabis for use for PTSD.
Yeah, I think a lot of people aren't aware of the fact that that cannabis is a dream suppressant. So, with people with PTSD that have bad dreams at night from, whether it's a traumatic experience or have been in war and whatnot, that can be a real advantageous thing to be using to get over some of that stuff. So that's great news.
And Kevin, you know that there's domestic violence situations. There's goodness,
Yeah.
almost just tons of things. You could be in an automobile accident, or you could have Don Bailey evaluate your
Right.
medical marijuana license.
Yep.
And all of those could cause you some post-traumatic stress disorder. Although
Yeah.
we've identified veterans as the primary goal, I think we all realize that research would help a lot more people.
Agreed.
Yeah, it'll definitely help a lot of people that don't even know that maybe they're suffering from it. And everyone can benefit from cannabis. That's the truth. We are all medical patients of cannabis. But let's talk a little bit about the MRA and this new bulletin that came out. Speaking of our favorite drug of choice. Inhalable compound concentrate products, moon rocks, caviar, tarantulas, pre-infused or infused pre-rolls all require testing, even though the products that are going into those products are actually already tested. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, let's remember that we're trying to be as honest as we can with our labeling of product. Now, if you have, let's just call it a tarantula, you've got cannabis on the inside, you got a little concentrate on the inside, you got keef on the outside. Technically, that's at least 2, maybe 3 different tests for different products. Some moon rocks might involve as many as 4 or 5 different components. If you're trying to slap 4 or 5 different testing labels on a particular product package, you're probably not going to be successful, and you're probably going to cover up some important information. But if you have everything already assembled in a product and it's tested, one single label should satisfy the MRA's requirements for informing the consumer about what the THC content is, what are the other terpenes, and that it's been certified. So although superficially it sure looks like if all the components are okay, why not throw them together? It still creates an okay product. I think the focus here was on information and making sure that the labels are correct when the purchase is made.
Well, that absolutely makes sense. I guess my question is, does this require then, if you had the intention to make these, and of course these are only processors, correct, that can actually create these products, to take something that has been transferred without a C of A for the flower that ultimately will become one of these products, and the distillate that ultimately will become one of these products, to not require testing in order for it to become its final product. And then eventually the last procedure would be to test the product before it goes out for consumption. Are they still requiring testing of all of the ingredients individually before it goes into it, or can you surpass that if the intention is to the endpoint being one of these inhalable compound concentrate products?
Okay, so I have to be honest with you. I don't think that the bulletin, which was a brief 2.5 pager, essentially just 2 pages of valuable information, I don't think it got into that kind of detail, but it would be my suspicion that each one of those would have to be batch tested prior to being combined, because I'm just not certain that the MRA would allow you to mix those different things without having a test beforehand. But that's really a better question for the director himself.
Let's get him back on here. Well, I'm also reading right here that it says a cultivator or processor adding keef to a pre-roll. Now, before, my understanding was any time you added anything to anything else, you are processing. So can cultivators actually add keef to their pre-rolls?
I think I read in there no. I think it specifically said that cultivators were not allowed to. Well, maybe with cultivators, if it's from the same batch. Now, this is just speculation. It's not a guarantee from the MRA. But if the keef is produced from the same batch that produced a tested batch of cannabis, you should be able to keef up your joints, because technically it all has the same test results and it's essentially the same. So in that respect, perhaps you can. That's an interesting question.
Yeah, it's interesting. It seems like to me, we're moving fast with rule changes and whatnot, and I think that sometimes it's better to just take your time and kind of work our way into these things. We're only 3 years into legalization and regulation, and I think that some of these things could be overlooked. I was reading some legislation the other day about increasing the micro business to allow them to grow up to 300 plants and then still do retail and still bring in other products from other facilities. And now you start looking at the micro business, and the micro business is now better than a dispensary. So now a dispensary is at the disadvantage of the micro because we've changed the law and we're not looking at what the consequences of those things are. So I think we need to take our time with some of this stuff. We need to really think it through before just jumping the gun because one person says, hey, I've got a problem. So that's my input on that.
Well, you've really identified two separate things that are important. First of all, sometimes people rush to market. They think there's such a value to being first. And oftentimes that comes at a consequence. When you're first, but you didn't wait for the rules to be developed, like Tom said, just slow your roll a little bit, then you may invest a lot of money in machinery that's not allowed to be utilized. The second thing, though, when you're talking about the new license type, that's a proposed license type in the admin rules. What that would be a like a Class A micro business, instead of having just a limitation of 150 plants where you're completely isolated, where you can produce and distribute and grow all on your own, but you can't interact with anyone else. The 300 license would allow you to grow your own flower and sell it, but you could also import infused products from others because you're not allowed a processor's license. So you'd still only be able to sell flower from your own garden, but you'd still have an opportunity to achieve all those other products too. As far as I'm concerned, that sort of makes the regular micro business obsolete. Processing is an extra step that's kind of a hassle for most people. And if you are producing flower and you can send it out to someone else to be processed and then retail it yourself, that's a gift to a lot of people who have too many things to juggle already. So this was a result of the Social Equity Committee, Social Equity and Licensing Committee. Although there's no social equity component tied to it, this is one of those license types that came from a dialogue with actual licensees or potential licensees. So there's probably a lot more logic involved in the creation of this than we are aware of. But I agree with you, Kevin. It does seem to make obsolete some of the other license types, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because it's like, if I was in that work group, I would say that, it'd be super advantageous if you just allowed us to grow at our houses and sell from our houses and process at our house. I mean, how far do we go with it? You know what I mean? Like, so that's my concern. I feel like, as a regulated business owner, I want to see some stability at some point. It seems like everything's always changing, and I knew that we were going to get into that because we're a new industry, but I think Tom can attest some stability would be really nice.
Oh yeah. Well, consistency, stability, all of that. I mean, those are all things that, businesses thrive on. Otherwise, how do you know where to spend your money?
Right.
I mean, it's easy when you're spending somebody else's money, but when you've been doing it yourself, yeah, you really do second guess a lot of scaling decisions based upon what could change. And you have to make all those contingency plans, but I think that's probably good due diligence anyway. But it is interesting. I guess I never even thought about the fact that a micro business that can bring in products from anywhere is just and sell it is technically a provisioning center. And what are the fees for that license type? I know our fees when we got our first medical license they started at $66,000 for a medical Class C grow. Next year it's going to cost us maybe $8,000. I know that's also a factor of how many licenses are out there. And I know that's in the rules, but it's just one of those things that the constantly changing thing, everything's a moving target. And we are the highest regulated industry, in the country for the most part, other than like maybe, nuclear power. I know more than casinos.
If you recall the Diamond situation and now our Delta 8 situation too, there were people that saw this product coming on the market. They invested in some infrastructure in order to make that happen. And the Marijuana Regulatory Agency said, stop. We want to make sure that the way you're producing this product meets our standards. And when they did finally approve Diamonds and when they will finally approve Delta 8, the way they produce it might be different than all of the equipment people have already produced. Not having that consistency means oftentimes people lose a lot of money. This is not just a hypothetical. This is really affecting people's livelihoods.
Yeah, I agree. Speaking of instability, a record-setting month in the month of July again. We saw a 56% increase. Great news for the industry. We're growing. We're growing faster than we can keep up. What are you seeing out there, Rick? What have you seen about the market? Do you think it's going to continue to increase, or what are your thoughts?
I interviewed Director Brisboe on one of my other programs earlier this year, and I also interviewed him in December. In December, he said he thought in 2021 we'd hit $1.5 billion in our industry. When I interviewed him later this year, he said, "Well, probably in fiscal 1.5, but if you look at calendar year 2021, we might hit 2 billion." That's an incredible growth rate, which is outstripping all of our other Midwestern states that have recreational or medical sales. The other thing to note is that medical sales are still holding very strong at $48 million of that 170 some million for the monthly total. So in a situation where many people thought medical would just sort of wither and die, hasn't happened yet. So that's encouraging too for all those patients that still need centers to be able to come and get their product from. But I'm encouraged by what we're seeing here. I'm not a big fan of the Anderson Economic Group study, which was the MCMA funded study by an economic group here in Michigan to show how much cannabis was being consumed by people in the unregulated market. But when you consider if the Anderson Group's study is accurate, there's still millions of cannabis users out there in Michigan who have not converted to the regulated market yet. So Kevin, Tom, there's no ceiling. There's no ceiling on our dance hall, man. We can party until we reach the sky.
Yeah, it's crazy. So counterintuitive. Everybody would have thought that with recreational, that medical people would give up their cards and move on. But the reality is now that it's a 2-year card, it's a 15% discount. So if you're a regular consumer and you go to the dispensary regularly, it's well worth getting your medical card. I do know that a lot of the doctors' offices have now gone virtual, so that makes it a lot more convenient for people to just hop online, get their recommendation, and fill out their paperwork. It's not that all that inconvenient anymore. So I think that could be played a part as well.
You also have other protections that don't protect you under the adult use law. So having your medical card is it's important. If you have a legitimate reason to have it, even though I do believe, like I said before, that all human beings are medical cannabis users. So, but yeah, it makes sense to have that card. If something were to happen and you ended up on probation, you can still use your medicine, which is not the case under the adult use until somebody challenges that. But that's how it is.
We had an attorney on my show yesterday, and that would be David Rudoy, whose birthday was yesterday. So belated birthday to David. And he mentioned again the significance of keeping your medical card, and it's in more than just driving situations, in employment situations, and the way that police officers treat you. Having the medical card still offers so many benefits, and Kevin said maybe one of the best, 15% discount.
Yeah.
Come on, man.
Yeah. Well, and not only that, let's jump into something else too. So Jason Szymanski got released from prison this last week with the help of Bruce Leach and the Michigan Freedom Coalition helping him get out. And all that kind of dials back, I believe, to the Michael Toohey case, where being able to consume marijuana on probation has now become something that you can do if you have a medical card. And so, Rick, talk to us about that.
So Jason was actually on parole several years ago for another offense, and he received his medical marijuana card, and under a doctor's orders, he was using cannabis while on parole. His PO officer violated his parole and threw him back in jail for 3 years. He'd still be there if it wasn't for the People v. Toohey case. Now, the People v. Toohey case involves Michael Toohey from Traverse City, who sued to allow to be able to use medical cannabis while he's on probation. The Michigan medical marijuana law says you're not allowed to have any penalization or any disadvantage because of your medical use of cannabis. So Toohey really set a precedent for people who are doing this. Now, the Department of Corrections would have just let Jason sit there and rot with this new decision if it hadn't been for the action of the Redemption Foundation, Cannabis Caucus, the Last Prisoner Project, Cannabis Caucus of the Michigan Democratic Party, Clean Smoke Initiative. We had quite a great group of people trying hard to get Jason released. We were successful, and he was released just the other day. Jason's one big wish was for a bicycle, because he doesn't drive. He likes to bike everywhere he goes, and he was worried that having coming out after being in there for 3 years, he'd have no wheels. Well, I happened to post it on social media, and Bruce Leach, who's not only an attorney, he's also the owner of the Sweet Leaf Dispensary in Flint, which is an adult use and medical center. He stepped up to the plate and said, don't get donations. I'll just buy the guy a bike. So literally hours after he was released from prison in Jackson, Mike McCurdy, who's the chair of the Cannabis Freedom Coalition, drove him to Flint. We went to several different shops before we found the right bike for him. And when he saw that bike, his eyes lit up, and everybody knew that was the right choice. He was so excited, he drove circles in the parking lot in a rainstorm because he just couldn't keep his feet off the pedals any longer. So that's a success story on many different levels. But it also emphasizes the point that folks who are incarcerated need help while they're in prison. They need help in order to get out of prison, and then they need assistance after they leave. And that's really what the Redemption Foundation's been focused on. So kudos to all of the people involved in that, including Denise Kirchhoff, who spoke at Jason's parole hearing, Mike McCurdy, who's done so much work for him, and Marshall Clabeau, who's also been a real big champion for Jason.
Yeah, I saw the video afterwards that he was talking about the bike, and you could just see the excitement on his face and his gratitude. I think that we've talked about this on the show before. I've mentioned it. In our political turmoil that we're in right now, I think it's no better time than now to be compassionate towards one another, be empathetic. And I know when you get out of jail or get out of prison, that it can be an anxious time, the unknown of how you're going to proceed forward and whatnot, and to at least give him a moment of some kind of solace and know that he's got people that have got his back and are cheering for him. I think it's awesome. I think it's amazing. And it's gratitude. Like I said, he just said over and over how much he wants to give back and to help other people. And that's just amazing. You're muted.
It's really amazing when you talk about the things that someone who's been in prison values when they get out. Not a great big shiny car, just a bike. And he didn't want a great big gigantic lobster meal. He just wanted Subway. He has very, very basic wishes when he got out. Not something it would take a boatload of money to satisfy. So when people think about maybe can I help this gentleman, it doesn't take a lot. It maybe just takes a few hours out of your day to help people out. But it's an assistance that's so needed, and you'll make a friend for life. Help a parolee, you'll never lose that guy as a friend.
Yeah, I agree. And another thing I wanted to talk about real quick was to give an update on my expungement. We've been working with the Great Lakes Expungement Network and Josie Scroggins to get my marijuana convictions removed from my record, and I've kind of been documenting it over the last few months on the show, and I wanted to give an update. So I met with Barton Morris this last week, one of his assistants, Michael, down there. They're filing some paperwork with the court. Assuming that the prosecutor is agreeable, they'll go ahead and just remove it from my record. If not, I will have to schedule a court date. We'll have to go down in front of the judge and make the argument that I should be able to get it expunged, which I don't believe that there is any argument against. But it's just procedural at this point. So we're making good progress. We're a couple months in. So I just want to again, tell all the listeners that if you have a marijuana conviction, reach out to the Great Lakes Expungement Network. You can reach them at greatlakesexpungementnetwork.com. Talk to Josie Scroggins and she'll get you hooked up. And the Redemption Foundation is paying the $500 that it costs us out of pocket to pay the attorneys that are reducing it down from $2,500 to $500. And so, yeah, the Redemption will take care of all the costs. Great Lakes Expungement Network will get you lined up with an attorney and get the paperwork process. So I just wanted to give a quick update on that.
Kevin, that really underscores.
Awesome.
There's another thing to be concerned here too, because freedom isn't equal all the way across the state. What county you live in has a lot to do with whether or not you get expungements. Because as you mentioned, because of the way that they passed the cannabis portion of the Clean Slate Initiative, there's still an opportunity for prosecutors to say no to your attempt to have your cannabis crimes expunged. And if you live in a county like Washtenaw, you're never going to have a problem with that prosecutor. But if you live in a county in the Upper Peninsula, you just might. It's just distressing that the same person for the same crime is given different justice in different parts of the state. There's something better. There's a better way to do it. I don't have the answers, but we should continue to seek a better way. I think it's valuable.
Yeah, I agree. I live in Livingston County, and Livingston County has not always been one of the friendliest counties in the state of Michigan when it comes to cannabis. In fact, simple possession of marijuana is still second time as a felony. So, we'll see what happens going through this. I'm interested to see how they're going to react. I'm almost certain that I'll be the first person that'll come in front of them to try to get an expungement for cannabis. So I'm proud to be leading the charge. I'm proud to be able to announce to the world that we're making progress. Yeah, it's been a long haul, but we're finally getting there, and I'm super proud of how far we've gotten.
You know, you mentioned Barton Morris. Barton was also helpful with the Jason Szymanski situation. Plus, he's also uh, working to try and free Rudy Gammo from prison,
Yeah.
whose small son has
Such a sad
big
deal.
illness. It's a terrible story, and Rudy is absolutely in prison for things that people are doing right now and making millions of dollars for. And I know, Tom, you wanted to jump in a minute ago, but man, that's just sad. It just drives me crazy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that just kind of the consistency, compassion, that's things that we seek justice, real justice for the injustices, for inequality and how we treat people. I mean, all these things can go a long way in life. And we really need to get that back and start really caring about, people and being consistent across the board.
You know, it's one thing to get people to believe in the healing powers of cannabis. It's another thing to get people to say, you know what, that guy that got busted for cannabis, he probably shouldn't have been. For whatever reason, people just cling to that criminality. They still cling to that you're a bad man kind of a philosophy, no matter how much they believe in cannabis anymore. And that's true.
Or, well, they can't admit that they're wrong either.
That's it. There's ego involved in it too. It's not just about science or well-being. It's about my personal history. Did I do something wrong in the past that I will feel bad about? If so, I'm just going to ignore it. So they try to pretend like cannabis laws haven't changed. But man, we have so many different tools now to help people out, as Kevin is proving to everybody right now.
Yeah, well, you guys, you know what? We could sit here and we could talk all day about this. And it's great to talk about these things because bringing these things to the forefront is how we get movements moving and get things happening. So I want to thank you guys for all your efforts over the years. But real quick, before we get out of here, I want to give everybody a chance to give some final thoughts. So Tom, over at Relief, why don't you give us some final thoughts for the day?
I just wanted to thank you, Kevin, for carrying the show today. I really appreciate it. And of course, it's always great to talk to Rick. We have these conversations all the time. It's nice to maybe document them every once in a while.
Yeah, I agree. It just can't be more fun to be able to get the time to sit down with you guys and chop it up. But Rick, real quick, you got any final thoughts on our conversations today?
Well, pay attention to the news. One of the things you may have noticed from our theme here is that stuff changes fast. And if you're not on top of it, you're behind it. So keep an eye on the socialrevolution.org. Keep an eye on the relevant Facebook pages and social medias. But, be proactive. Call the MRA. Reach out to your local paper and say, has there been an update in something? And stay in contact with your lawmakers. They're going to be very crucial the last part of this particular year. After our September 15th caregiver rally on the steps of the Capitol, there's going to be a push to make changes to the medical and the recreational laws here in Michigan. Let's make sure that we fully understand them and that we only support the ones that we believe in.
Yep, I agree, Rick. I really want to thank you for all your efforts over the years, man. You've been so influential to this movement. Again, there's only a handful of people that you could say, like, realistically, that we couldn't have done this without you, and you're one of those guys. You know what I mean? So I'm super proud to call you a friend and be fighting side by side with someone like yourself. So thanks again. Thanks for being on the show, and we really appreciate all your efforts, buddy.
Thank you. We can let Ryan take more vacations because this was fun.
This was fun. Anyways, guys, we're going to get out of here. I want you guys to, all our listeners, remember to check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbeam, and Facebook. Follow us on those platforms, and we'll catch up with you next week. Have a good week.